So
basically,
I actually had a discussion with, and I think it was Jerry, what's his name, for the guy from LA on
right.
Twitter, basically saying, you say defund the police, but I look on your website and I can't find a definition of what you mean by defund. And he just kind of came back at me at first with like, oh well, because of black oppression, we need to, take away the money that's military. I'm saying, are you saying just to remove a portion of the funds from military? Because when I look up in 4 or 5 different dictionaries, defund means
Right.
remove funding. It
Right.
doesn't
Well, I
mean
see a lot of
it doesn't mean reduce the budget.
I see a lot of
You know.
qualifiers, when people defending defund the police. Well, what I really mean is not totally
Well, that's
defund
the
the
thing.
police. I mean,
Communication's everything, right? I
yeah,
mean,
and maybe, and a lot of, you see people saying F the police, and you see like, okay, or maybe we should have community policing. We should get rid of the police and build up from the bottom up or whatever. And that's all fine. It's just that it's vague, So like you have MPP calling for
exactly.
this on their platform. Well, is there a specific, first of all, how are you going to do this? I mean, you have the police already exist as an organization, right? So you have, like, if you get into a car accident,
Yeah.
this afternoon, the police are going to show up, right, and do an accident report, right? I mean, you depend on
Right.
those police. So like, if you just get rid of the police, what are you going to replace it with? What's going to, and I'm not arguing in favor
And,
of the,
and the problem is they lose people that generally would be completely on their side, because I'm like, oh,
right,
remove military equipment, remove, demilitarize them, have citizen boards on the disciplinary hearings,
I mean, to
all this
me,
kind of stuff. I'm
it's
like,
like,
I'm completely on board with all of that. And the stuff that we said was happening in maybe in Boston, they're looking to have things where have proper response, have mental health folks
right. So I mean,
reply to,
specific actions
yeah,
make a lot of sense. But like,
right.
it reminds me of like going into Iraq and thinking like you're going to do nation building. When Bush sent in L. Paul Bremer as a pleno, whatever the term is, the
Oh
head
yeah, right,
honcho
yeah,
there, and it's like, oh,
yeah,
we're gonna. First of all, he dissolved the army, which is a big mistake because
yeah,
a lot of those people went to ISIS. They
exactly,
formed ISIS, right? But I mean,
right,
basically, it's like we're going to build this from the ground up. We're going to give women rights. We're going to have women's rights. We're going to have all these things, and it sounds great on paper, but to actually have it actualized is virtually impossible. So like, it's a
mm,
lot easier to say, okay, for like the police, they're just going to get rid of the police and we're going to build a whole new police force. I mean, you see
yeah,
this whenever there's a revolution, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, they try to start a whole new thing up. In the French Revolution, they even got rid of the calendar and they started like a 10-month, calendar. It didn't make any sense. It didn't last very
right,
long.
yeah,
You have to make reforms where they make sense. And like for the police, obviously, the problem is the militarization of the police. No one
right.
complained. I mean, people
But
complain.
I do want to say, I will say quickly,
Go ahead.
step one in reasonable reforms is communicating your intention correctly. And I almost get the way this back and forth went, I almost got the impression that they wanted to leave it vague to attract more people that were more excited to get out and demonstrate or something. That it was almost like by intention that it wasn't obvious what they meant, which is
Okay.
horrible to start off with. I
Well,
don't
I
know. That
mean,
was my. I'm not sure, but
you could say defund the police and then have dot 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 under it. First
and
dot,
and there's nothing there about that.
get
Yeah.
rid of the militarization. Second dot is like encourage community policing, and whatever the third dot is, the bullet point. You have those. So just to kind of say, well, this is kind of the direction we're going. It doesn't have to be this. We want this specific exact, legislation with this and this. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
but
But
something a little bit more specific
but
than
in
just
total, what
general.
they have, yeah, in total, what they have on this website is defund police and divert funds back to schools and social services,
Well, and to say like,
which is
cut credit card payments, cut interest,
ambiguous.
student loan debt. So that's, it's great, but how do you actually put that into practice? Like without cutting, you know, without changing other things like, like the military budget or
Right.
changing
Yeah.
things like the tax structure, right? Like how do
Yeah.
you, disparity of wealth? I mean, those are all like
But
big
Steve, you
issues.
can't have it both ways. You can't have it that, the people, first you were saying that the people, that all these groups, they didn't have any clear-cut demands. But then now they have clear-cut demands, and now you're saying that they're not feasible, or that how are you gonna, you have to be even more detailed about how you're gonna do that. So, I mean, you have
Well,
to start
I mean,
somewhere, right?
better than just saying, we want a total revolution, just get rid of everything that exists, but it's not really. I think you need something more specific, like defund the police. The problem with that is that it's got to be a little more nuanced than just like defund the police, because because one person thinks it means one thing and somebody else thinks it
But the
means
whole point of
different.
saying defund the police is just, it's more of an attention grabber, right? It's because you
Right.
can't have like a whole slogan that's not going to be, or like a whole phrase isn't going to be like something that can catch on as quickly, right? But something like defund the police, okay, so you catch people's attention,
Right.
right? So then that opens up the conversation, and where do
Right.
you go from there?
But I agree.
Obviously, you do have a lot of people that
Yeah.
they don't have a well formulated framework for what it is that they're looking for, because a lot of people, they just jump onto these movements because they are more followers than they are leaders. What I do see is that unfortunately we do have a lot of people who are trying to emerge as leaders of all these different movements, and in like an attempt to have intersectionality, right? They're coming together on certain things because they're starting to see how these things intersect, but there's too many chefs in the kitchen, essentially.
So I agree 100% with the idea that defund the police as an attention grabber is great, but then I should go to the website and find out what does that mean.
Of course.
And when and it's not there. and that's specifically what my discussion with folks on MPP were.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying about there's too many chefs in the kitchen, right? Because technically, this whole, I think this movement is something that should be led more by Black Lives Matter, you know?
What about, we did talk a little bit about Tulsi, and, of course, we all met through the Tulsi campaign. And I guess, to me, at least, the campaign she was an interesting candidate because, first of all, not just because of her progressive ideas and her view on the war machine and everything, but the idea of being able to communicate with people that you don't agree with and reach across the aisle instead of this adversarial model of, red versus blue, left versus right, whatever, Democrat versus Republican, like
Right.
the false dichotomy of the duopoly, and seeing beyond that, and just like being able to communicate and also identify the real problem as not being, the two sides of the same coin, but rather going outside of that, and also I think she recognized that populism was a rising wave in the country. I don't know how successful she really was at capturing that. I don't think, obviously, not as successful as Trump, for instance, or even Bernie Sanders. But I think we have to keep in mind that that's how we met, and that's that she represents that kind of effort to kind of go beyond the adversarial model, because everyone thinks, oh gee, if I can just get my candidate elected, right, they're gonna push through their legislation. This is gonna make people change. It's gonna make the country change. And yeah, obviously, if you have an FDR type candidate and they're able to do a New Deal, and that is going to change things. But you got to have, first of all, you got to have super populist backing. You got to have all the members of Congress who are going to vote for this as well. And you got to have a real tidal wave, to push something like that through. And I don't see, if we win by a thin margin in this presidential election, or whatever presidential election, is it really going to, change things? So, like, where does Movement for People's Party fit into that paradigm? Are they part of the kind of left versus right, or are they part of like this bigger movement? I see them as a little bit of both.
So I probably have a lot to say about that, because I've gotten on a number of the calls, and again, I've had discussions with folks online, including, I think, some of the higher up folks about it. I believe in some cases, like Jerry and another person that's fairly high up were replying to me. And as you're saying, one thing I loved about Tulsi's campaign is you would go to her town halls and she would literally ask people, like, is anybody here Republican, libertarian? And generally there was a celebration of that, right? That we were, we're all here to try and get something done, and we're from different backgrounds, and that's a good thing. And I've been trying to talk to the Movement for the People's Party and basically say, if they really want to open their arms up, they have to be careful of the communication. In that, like, on the calls, they end up, it obviously is extremely left, right? Everyone is like extremely left on there. what do you call it, the Twitter account is likely to have all sorts of postings about, you know, Malcolm X and things along like that that are just not going to welcome folks from all parties, right? And you know, they're doing, like, on the call, at the end of the call, they do like a meditation and all this kind of stuff. Now all that stuff is great, right? But that to me means you want to be in a club that is kind of by its own, you know, by its nature exclusionary, right? You want all people that you're not really welcoming other people, libertarians or more conservative folks with those type of activities.
Well, I mean, is that part of their program? Do they say we welcome people from all parts of the political spectrum? We want to try to create a unified movement, or are they not explicit about that?
Supposedly, that is their mission statement: is to build a coalition of all people. That is what, and
Yeah.
it goes
Okay.
across ideological lines. Supposedly, that is what at least Nick Brana has been trying to sell it as.
Right, and they are big
Yeah,
on
well,
personal freedom, right? I mean, I mean, aren't they critical of the surveillance state, and you know that they defend privacy and things like that are libertarian
yes.
concerns?
So just like in my experience, that hasn't been the emphasis. It hasn't been emphasized as much as it should be, because there is a lot to that would really have wide appeal. And I just, at first I was really enthusiastic, and now I kind of feel like they're going to become another Green Party where it's, and I don't know yet, it's not cast in stone obviously, but I'm afraid that it's going to become another Green Party where it's a really fun club and you get some really great candidates maybe that get in at a lower level, but you're never really going to make over the you know, the politics of the country.
Well, the big issue that the Green Party tends to come across is that they are seen as an elitist group, right? Where you have to check off all these boxes in order to be able to participate or to be part of their group. So at least from what I've seen, because like I said, I used to be a Green. Right now, I'm just unaffiliated with anyone. But you know what? And mostly because right now the Greens, it's like a big shit show about what's going on with their presidential election. But yeah, unfortunately, that's the problem, that they may not actually be an elitist kind of group. I mean, I didn't get that kind of sense when I was there, but it does. To a lot of people, it comes off as like you have to be this environmentalist and you have to be you know, a vegan, and you have to, you know what I'm saying? Like there's all these boxes that you have to check off in order to be part of it. And supposedly Movement for a People's Party was supposed to transcend that. It wasn't supposed to be.
And again, that was, you know, that was my impression of the goal. But I got on the all right, I'm sorry. My old man is showing. What's the name of the app that they're using? Slack. I got on Slack, and I'm trying to engage and just say, and I tried to put it in a nice way, that I don't want this just to be another Green Party. I want it to succeed, and so I'm just going to bring this criticism. And I wouldn't say I was shouted down, but my reaction was kind of like, you know, I think I used the comparison that it was kind of like a Nancy Pelosi after 2016. Oh no, we're all good. Nobody really wants any change. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine, you know. And I'm just like, you know, please be open to criticism, especially when it's coming from somebody that really wants to see you succeed.
It's necessary. It's necessary to have that open dialogue.
Right. And I kind of felt like at first people jumped on me a little bit, and then some of the higher ups kind of came in trying to smooth things over without really saying that, yeah, we don't want to be another Green Party, we have to watch our messaging or something like that. So I don't know. I'm just I'd like to see Moving for a People's Party be what we're all talking, what we think it should be.
Right.
But
I mean, they have to. There's so many different parties, like on the left, right? I mean, well, you have the Green Party, you have MPP, which is really more of a coalition movement, and you have Justice Democrats. You have all these different groups and parties. You know, which one is actually going to catch on? That's the question. Or is it going to catch on enough to actually make a difference? Because, you know, obviously everything is stacked against third parties, right? And it's very, very difficult for third parties to establish.
And just a little note,
Yeah.
they do not want to be referred to as a third party because
Okay.
it legitimizes the duopoly, the corporate duopoly. So they want you to call it a major new party.
A major new
I'm into the
party.
messaging. I like the idea. I wanted them to succeed, and I see that about the action today. Grana is on Jimmy Dore, so all of you go watch that after this.
I mean, to me, it seems that the move that there's a rising populism, right? It's been pretty clear ever since Trump, right? That people are just and Bernie Sanders. I mean, you have these two populists
Yeah.
involved in 2016 that obviously they gained a lot of traction, and people realize more and more that the duopoly is corrupt, that Washington is corrupt. You know, it's a swamp. There's so much money involved that they aren't really the people's interests don't really matter, and that's what can potentially unify the so-called left and the right, right? The libertarians and the progressives can be unified on a lot of these issues because they're against like the foreign entanglements, they're against the surveillance, they're against a lot of different things in common. I think we got to remember that, and the MPP it would behoove them to remember, that's the basis of this, that the powers that be are not solving the problems in DC. Nothing's getting done. We're not dealing with climate change. We're not dealing with the wealth disparity. We're not dealing with all the foreign entanglements. So like we need to deal with that. So there is a potential for that traction. I just don't see it happening yet because nobody knows about it. We know about MPP, but like if I talk to anybody, like my friends and family, they don't know about MPP. They haven't heard of it.
Right,
They've heard the Greens.
and they're not likely to get a lot of publicity even after the action today. And I realize as I'm looking at the fact that it's listed as being at a park in Worcester, I think they're all starting at parks, but then going to have a march to the representative's house. So that's actually what that's about. When I looked at a few others on the map, they are starting at parks, but going to be a march. Yeah, so I agree with what you're saying completely, Steve, regarding populism and the fact that, and I think that, like I say, Movement for People's Party has to watch it with getting too tangled up in identity politics. They have to think about, because that's what the Dems use to drive people apart now. They want to keep people apart. They don't want populism to win, and they use tactics like that to keep people that all really want healthcare and good jobs and a clean, safe environment.
Right.
People are the same in really what they need to be happy, right? And freedoms and protected and liberties.
I mean, there's such an opportunity right now for a populist, what do you want to call it, progressive or not, but a populist coalition, because I mean, Trump is imploding totally. I mean, Trump, like he doesn't even seem like he really wants to be reelected, and Biden is.
And yet he showed there's that, and yet he shows there's that demand for that populist.
Well, he showed it
he showed that demand, even though he executed it all wrong.